My name is Madeline Stone, and welcome to my AP Bio Symposium. Today, we will be discussing fibrodysplasia ossificans progressiva, or FOP for short, which is a rare disease that turns cells into bone. I chose to study this disorder because I have been captivated by the stories of FOP patients for years. I have also been theorizing a potential treatment for this disease, and I hope to work with the leading expert on FOP, Dr. Frederick Kaplan, in the future. I want to help these people with this rare condition and revolutionize the world of medicine. Now, without further ado, let's explore FOP. FOP is a disease which affects the fundamental supports of the human body, the bones. FOP is characterized by unwanted ossification, which is another word for saying bone formation that destroys joints, ligaments, and muscles, turning them into bone and encasing the patient in a permanent second skeleton. FOP is the only known disease in the world in which one type of cell can morph into another within the human body. FOP is extremely rare, and there are less than 1,000 documented cases worldwide. Though prenatal detection is possible due to the isolated gene, most doctors do not test for FOP specifically, as the chances of someone having this disease are incredibly slim, and the fetal bones may not show any prevalence of ossification. A key feature of FOP patients is the malformation of the great toe at birth, where the great toe juts out at an angle. Due to the rarity of this disease, however, this key feature is often overlooked by doctors. The first signs of FOP can also vary from patient to patient and vary with age. Most FOP patients develop their first symptoms between the ages of 2 and 5. Most are diagnosed at 3 years old. However, there are documented cases of patients which experience no symptoms until their late teens. Ossification can occur spontaneously or be triggered by an infection or any other physical trauma to the body. When a healthy person experiences physical trauma, white blood cells rush to the area to consume damaged cell material in a process known as phagocytosis. In FOP patients, the white blood cells consume both healthy and damaged tissue within the area, cannibalizing the body on a cellular level. The few cells that are unaffected by the white blood cells are stem cells. In healthy patients, these stem cells would quickly repair the damage left by the physical trauma. In FOP patients, however, after the stem cells replace the damaged tissue, the stem cells morph into cartilage and then ossify into bone. When this is occurring, the affected area becomes painful and swells. This is known as a flare-up, which is a typical indication of FOP. Because new FOP bone formation develops from physical trauma, surgeries to remove the bone growth often result in even more ossification, which can leave patients permanently disabled. Flare-ups are also often mistaken for tumors prior to diagnosis, and many patients receive intense chemotherapy that damages their body further. FOP is caused by a mutation within chromosome 2q23-24, which affects the gene ACVR1. ACVR1 is the gene responsible for manufacturing activin receptor type 1 proteins. Activin receptor type 1 proteins are part of the bone morphogenic protein family, or BMPs for short, which are proteins responsible for regulating bone growth. Specifically, this mutation can be traced to a single codon, which changes amino acid 206 from arginine to histidine, or R2O6H, within ACVR1. The consequences of this codon mutation can have catastrophic results. As a result of this codon switch, the DNA instructs the activin receptor type 1 proteins to become more active than normal, especially when bound to extracellular proteins known as ligands. Intercellular proteins known as SMADs then carry the BMP signal to the cell's nucleus, where the stem cells are misdirected to produce cartilage instead of muscle and other tissue cells. This then ossifies into bone. In healthy patients, the activin receptor type 1 proteins would not be mutated and would not produce excessive BMP signaling. The stem cells would rebuild normal tissue, therefore preventing bone growth from developing spontaneously and occurring in other organ systems. In FOP patients, the mutated activin receptor type 1 protein fires BMP signals excessively, meaning the process of bone growth continues in other parts of the body where ossification should not occur. In most cases, FOP is a spontaneous mutation, meaning that the majority of patients have no family history of the disease. If someone with FOP does decide to have kids, however, the mutation is autosomal dominant, also known as heterozygous dominant. Embryos with a homozygous dominant mutation of FOP do not survive to term, as this mutation is fatal for the fetus. The autosomal dominance means that there is a 50-50 chance that children of FOP patients will also develop FOP. Most patients with FOP do not have children, however, as childbirth can lead to more excessive flare-ups, and most adults have progressive FOP by the time they are of childbearing age, making intercourse difficult. FOP is not a sex-linked disorder, meaning that any person of any gender is at equal risk, and there is no correlation to ethnic background. The life expectancy for someone with FOP is 40 to 45. People with FOP often suffer from respiratory issues due to the ossification of muscles controlling the rib cage, so the lungs are unable to expand as much as they need to. There is no known cure for FOP. Most patients have to learn how to manage living with the disease. Depending on the severity and progression of FOP, patients with FOP may be able to live on their own for a period or need round-the-clock assistance. Most FOP patients are reliant on assistance by early adulthood. High-dose corticosteroids are often prescribed to reduce the severity of flare-ups, but new bone growth is ultimately inevitable. Some FOP patients take zero medication altogether, such as Joe, as it's inevitable whether or not the bone formation will occur. Doctors hope that therapies utilizing BMP pathway antagonists will yield potential in the future as a treatment for FOP. BMPs such as activin receptor type 1 proteins can be regulated by antagonists, otherwise known as chemicals, that directly bind to the BMP ligand, preventing the BMP receptor from activating excessively. This potential treatment can slow bone growth down, however, a long-lasting cure is still in the making. To understand FOP from a personal perspective, I interviewed Joe Such about what it's like to live with FOP. Joe is both an FOP patient himself, as well as an advocate for the International FOP Association, or IFOPA, which is a leading association in FOP studies. So when I reached out to Joe, I didn't know what first to expect, and I was surprised by how real and raw many of his answers were to my questions. I asked Joe many questions such as, what was it like to have FOP? How did it affect your mindset? What do you want people to know about FOP? And what advice would you give to a child with FOP? Joe explained to me that he was originally diagnosed with FOP when he was 3, and they originally had him go through chemotherapy, which made things worse. Joe explained to me that while growing up, he faced a lot of ableism due to his disability, both systematically and socially. People thought he was dumb or incapable of doing things, so he felt the need to overcompensate as a result. He told me that what he appreciated was being seen for him as an individual, rather than for his disability. His advice to anyone who struggled with FOP is to take the time to assess your situation, know that you may lose most of your mobility within the span of the next 10 years. Because Joe was so young when he was diagnosed, Joe's mindset around FOP did not change once he heard his diagnosis. He has firmly stated that he is an atheist and does not believe in any sort of God. Despite all what he's been through, Joe has learned to accept his condition and found other ways to motivate himself. Joe currently runs a successful YouTube channel and podcast where he talks about his condition and discusses all sorts of things From important issues such as mental health and FOP advocacy to rating actors in films over the years. He's also become a media influencer on platforms such as Instagram. Overall, I really enjoyed talking to Joe. He was really funny and sarcastic, and the interview was a lot better than I expected. I was able to relate on a lot of the things he said, oddly enough, despite not having a physical condition, as many of the things he talked about, such as ableism, are things that I relate to due to my learning differences. He's super funny and a great listener, so I would totally recommend reaching out to him on social media and other platforms. FOP is a rare yet infamous disorder with few treatments and zero finalized cure. While antagonists such as palovarotene can help with managing bone formation, this treatment is still in clinical trials. Just one mutation of a single gene and the switch of a single codon can cause catastrophic effects within the human body, resulting in painful flare-ups and new bone growth. Despite this, those who live with the disease refuse to let it define them. These incredible people continue to persevere through the challenges of their disorders and advocate for awareness in better treatments. I'm so incredibly grateful to have been given the opportunity to talk with Joe and to spread awareness about this disease. If you want to know more, contact the IFOPA and consider donating. Stay curious.